Can we bring her home for Christmas, Daddy?
Can we bring her home for Christmas, Daddy? The girl asked, seeing the obese widow with her unsold ragdolls. Remove those hideous things from my sight. Rosalind froze in the doorway, 3 dolls cradled in her arms. Her mother-in-law stood beside the Christmas tree, face twisted with disgust, pointing at the sideboard where Rosa had quietly placed the dolls 10 minutes earlier. I just thought, for the party, they'd look festive with the greenery. Festive. Margaret's voice rose sharp enough to cut glass. The women in the parlor, 12 of them, the church ladies gathered for the annual Christmas social, went silent. Every eye turned toward Rosa. Those monstrosities will not be displayed in my home while decent people are visiting. Rosa's face burned. They're just dolls. I made them. Exactly. Margaret crossed the room and snatched the doll with yellow yarn hair from the sideboard. Look at this thing. Poorly stitched. She pulled at the seam and the stitching ripped. Stuffing spilled onto the floor like guts. This is what you waste your time on instead of being useful? The women whispered. Rosa heard fragments. Poor Marcus. Can you imagine? Let herself go completely. Take them to your room, Margaret said, dropping the ruined doll at Rosa's feet. And then come to the kitchen. We need someone to serve refreshments. Someone who won't be seen. Rosa gathered the destroyed doll with shaking hands and fled. Behind her, Margaret's voice carried clearly, I apologize, ladies. My daughter-in-law has peculiar hobbies. Now, shall we discuss the Christmas Eve service? Laughter followed Rosa down the hall. The kitchen was supposed to be safe. Rosa had spent an hour arranging petit fours on silver trays, slicing hem thin as paper, brewing tea in the good china pot. Her back ached. Her hands were raw from scrubbing. But if she worked hard enough, maybe they'd see her value. Maybe they'd finally stop looking at her like she was something that needed to be scraped off their shoes. She was carrying the tea tray toward the parlor when Peter appeared. Marcus's younger brother. 26 years old, handsome in the way cruel men often are, and already drunk despite the party having started only an hour ago. Rosa. His voice was too loud. Still here. Still eating our food. Still taking up space in our house. Peter, please. The guests. He stepped closer, blocking her path, whiskey breath hot on her face. Do you know why Marcus really died? Her hands went numb. The tea tray tilted. Fever, she whispered. The doctor said fever. The doctor was kind. Peter's smile was cruel. But I know the truth. Marcus died to escape you. Couldn't stand another day looking at that. He gestured vaguely at her body. The man died to get away from his fat, pathetic wife. The tray crashed to the floor. China shattered. Tea spread across the floorboards in a dark, steaming pool. In the parlor, conversation stopped. Margaret appeared in the doorway. What have you done? I'm sorry I dropped. Clean it up. And stay in this kitchen until the party's over. I don't want the ladies upset by... She stopped, couldn't even finish the sentence, just waved her hand dismissively at Rosa's entire existence. Rosa dropped to her knees and started picking up pieces of broken china while the party continued without her. Midnight. Rosa sat on her narrow bed, door locked, making dolls by candlelight. Her hands moved automatically, stitch, pull, tie, cut. She'd been sewing since she was 6 years old. Her mother had taught her before the pneumonia took her when Rosa was 12. These dolls were the only thing Rosa had left of her mother. The technique, the pattern, the way each one had a round belly that made it look joyful instead of grotesque. 23 dolls sat in a row on her dresser. She was finishing the 24th now, orange yarn hair, a dress made from scraps of her wedding gown. Tomorrow was the Christmas Eve market. If she could sell even half of these dolls, she'd have enough money to leave this house. To find a room somewhere. To finally be free. She reached for her mother's button tin, dented copper, filled with pearl buttons from her mother's Sunday dress, copper ones from her father's work shirt, and 3 cream-colored ones from her wedding dress. The wedding dress she'd been cutting up piece by piece, transforming her marriage into something new. Something that might have value. She selected 2 buttons for the doll's eyes and pressed them into the fabric face. The 24 dolls. 24 chances. Tomorrow at the market, someone would see them and smile. Someone would see beauty in what she'd made. Someone would pay money for the pieces of her heart she'd stitched into every seam. And then she'd leave. No more Margaret. No more Peter. No more sitting in kitchens while people laughed at her in the next room. Rosa set the finished doll with the others and lay down without undressing. Through the floor, she could hear Peter's voice, still drunk, still laughing. Margaret's sharp replies. The sounds of a family she'd never truly been part of. She closed her eyes and counted hours until morning. Tomorrow. Freedom. A new life. She just had to survive one more day. The Christmas Eve market was everything Rosa had imagined and nothing she'd hoped for. Pine garlands draped between vendor stalls. Snow fell in soft, fat flakes that caught the light from dozens of lanterns. Carolers sang on the corner, "God rest ye merry gentlemen," their voices bright against the gray winter sky. Children ran shrieking between booths, faces flushed pink, mittened hands clutching pennies. The air smelled of roasted chestnuts, wood smoke, cinnamon cold. Rosa had arrived at dawn to claim her table, a small spot near the back, barely visible from the main walkway. She'd arranged her 24 dolls carefully, propping them so their wild yarn hair and cheerful patchwork dresses would catch eyes. Fat little dolls with button eyes and round bellies, each one different, each one made with every bit of skill she possessed. By noon, she'd sold nothing. Around her, the market thrived. The woman selling apple butter had sold out by 10 o'clock. The man with carved wooden trains was down to his last 3. Even Mrs. Patterson's ugly knitted socks, thick, practical, colorless, were flying off her table. But people walked past Rosa's dolls without stopping. Or worse, they stopped, picked one up, examined it with frowns, then set it back down and moved on. By 2 o'clock, Rosa's carefully built hope had started to crack. A woman in an expensive wool cloak stopped at the table. Her daughter, maybe 6, with blonde ringlets, immediately grabbed a doll with blue yarn hair. "Mama, look at her. She's perfect." The mother barely glanced. "How much?" $2, Rosa said, trying to keep her voice steady. The woman picked up the doll and turned it over, examining the stitching with a critical eye. $2? For a rag toy? They're handmade. Each one. These look diseased. The woman's voice was loud. Loud enough for people at neighboring stalls to hear. Loud enough to make heads turn. Like whoever made them. Rosa's vision blurred. The little girl started crying. "But Mama, I want her." "Absolutely not, Sarah. We'll find you something proper. Not this trash." The woman dropped the doll on the table and pulled her sobbing daughter away. Rosa stood frozen, face burning, while people stared and whispered. The little girl's cries faded into the crowd, but Rosa could still hear them. Could hear the word echoing. Diseased, diseased, diseased. The vendor beside her, a thin woman with sharp features, leaned over. "Excuse me, but you're blocking the view of my stall. Could you move your table?" Rosa wanted to scream, wanted to grab her dolls and run. Instead, she picked up the doll with blue yarn hair, the one the child had loved, and walked around her table. She found the little girl 20 feet away, still crying against her mother's skirt. "Excuse me," Rosa said quietly. The mother turned, face pinched with annoyance. "What?" Rosa held out the doll. "She can have it. No charge." The woman's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but the little girl stopped crying, staring at the doll with desperate longing. "Please," Rosa whispered. "Just take it." The mother snatched the doll and pulled her daughter away without a word of thanks. Rosa walked back to her table and sat down on the wooden bench behind it. Her hands were shaking. The market swirled around her, laughter, music, joy, belonging, and she was invisible in the middle of it all. "Excuse me?" She looked up. A man stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, with short golden brown hair and kind eyes. Beside him was a little girl, maybe 7, with dark braids and a purple bonnet tied under her chin. The girl was staring at the dolls with wonder. "These are beautiful," the girl whispered. She picked up a doll with blue yarn hair and a green dress, cradling it gently. "Look, Papa," she's smiling. The man, her father, looked at Rosa, then at the dolls, then back at his daughter. "Do you like them, Emma?" "I love them." Emma turned to Rosa. "Did you make these?" Rosa nodded, unable to speak. Emma's face lit up. "They're the best dolls I've ever seen." Something inside Rosa cracked open. Tears spilled over before she could stop them. The man crouched beside his daughter. "Emma, why don't you wait here a moment?" He approached Rosa carefully, the way you'd approach a frightened animal. "Are you all right, ma'am?" She shook her head, wiping her face with shaking hands. "I'm sorry. It's been a long day." The girl, Emma, came closer. "You're crying. Are you sad?" "Emma," her father said gently. But Emma didn't listen. She looked at the dolls, then at Rosa's face, then at the empty market around them. "Papa," she said softly, tugging his coat. "Can we bring her home for Christmas?" Rosa's breath caught. The man looked startled. "Emma, she's all alone. And it's Christmas Eve." Emma's voice was earnest, certain. "We have extra room. And she makes such beautiful things. Please, Papa?" The man looked at his daughter, then at Rosa. His expression shifted, surprise giving way to something thoughtful. He cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I'm Daniel Garrett. This is my daughter, Emma. We live about 3 miles north of town. If you don't have somewhere to be tomorrow, you'd be welcome to join us for Christmas." Rosa stared at him. "I couldn't possibly." "Please," Emma said. "We'd love to have you." Rosa's carefully built walls crumbled. She thought of the cold house waiting for her. The kitchen table where she'd eat alone while her in-laws feasted with the Reverend. "I was supposed to go to my sister's," she heard herself say. The lie came easily. "But she lives far and with the snow." Then it settled. Daniel's voice was kind but firm. "Come with us. At least for tonight." Emma beamed. "You can bring your dolls." Rosa looked at this man and his daughter, strangers who'd seen her crying and hadn't looked away. Who'd called her dolls beautiful. "All right," she whispered. "Thank you." Emma took her hand. "This is going to be the best Christmas ever." And for the first time in 3 years, Rosa let herself believe it might be true. The Garrett house sat small and warm against the winter darkness, smoke curling from the chimney into the starlit sky. Emma burst through the door ahead of them, tugging off her coat. "Come in, Miss Rosa. I'll show you everything." Rosa hesitated on the threshold, aware of her worn shawl, her too-tight dress, the basket of dolls in her arm. Daniel touched her elbow. "Please, come in." The house was simple but clean, smelling of pine and wood smoke. A modest Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with popcorn strings, paper chains, and tin ornaments catching the lamplight. Emma darted away. "Wait here. I want to show you something." She returned with a wooden box and opened it carefully. Inside were a faded blue shawl, a cracked silver hairbrush, and a small leather-bound book. "These were my mama's," Emma said softly. "She died when I was 4. I remember her buttons. She had a tin like yours. And she smelled like lavender." Rosa's throat ached. "I'm sure she was wonderful." "Papa says she was." Emma hesitated. "Do you miss your mama?" "Every day." "Me too." Daniel cleared his throat. "Emma, help Miss Rosa get settled. I'll start supper." The kitchen was warm and bright. Daniel worked at the stove while Rosa stood awkwardly. "Can you help?" "Oyster stew was my wife's specialty. I've never got it right." "I'd love to help." They worked side by side. Daniel opened oysters while Rosa prepared the cream base the way her mother taught her. Emma set the table, chattering about past Christmases and burnt biscuits. They ate by firelight, Emma squeezed between them, and for the first time in years, Rosa felt something like peace. After supper, Emma grew shy. Could Miss Rosa tell me a story? Papa only knows cowboy ones. They moved to the small bedroom. Emma burrowed under quilts. What kind of story? Rosa asked. A Christmas one. Rosa thought of her mother. She used to tell me about the Christmas star. Not the Bible one. Another. She said that on Christmas Eve, if you looked carefully, you could see a special star that only appeared once a year. It hung right over your house. Did you ever see it? Emma whispered. Once. I was 7. My father took me outside at midnight. There it was, so bright it hurt to look at. My mother said it meant we were loved. Emma hesitated. Do you think my mama can see the star? From heaven. Rosa blinked through tears. I think she sees you. And she's proud. What happened to your mama? She got sick. Pneumonia. I was 12. She taught me to make dolls before she died. Every stitch a lesson. That's why you make them, Emma murmured. Yes. Emma took Rosa's hand. I'm glad you came home with us. Me too. When Emma fell asleep, Rosa slipped out. Daniel was waiting in the doorway, face soft. She fell asleep happy, he said. She hasn't done that in a long time. Rosa moved toward leaving, but Daniel stepped closer. Said, not just tonight. Stay through Christmas. Please. Rosa remembered Margaret's house, the locked room, the voices through the floor. Just a few days, she whispered. Just a few days. Christmas morning arrived with pale sunlight and coffee. They exchanged simple gifts by the tree. Emma gave Rosa a drawing of the three of them holding hands. Daniel gave Rosa a spool of thread. Rosa gave Emma a doll with orange hair. Emma cried happy tears. They cooked dinner together, roast chicken and vegetables, and ate until they were full. At sunset, they went outside to look for the Christmas star. Emma pointed. Over our house. And there it was, bright against the dark sky. Daniel stood beside Rosa. Thank you, he said quietly, for giving her this. She gave it to me too. Days turned into weeks. Rosa stayed. She helped with daily chores, cooking, mending, tending to Emma. She fed the animals with Daniel in the cold mornings, her breath misting the air. She learned to can vegetables and make quilts by the fire. Daniel taught her and Emma to ride. Emma was fearless. Rosa clung to the saddle while Daniel walked beside her, patient and steady. You're doing fine, he said. Just breathe. Evenings fell into a natural rhythm. After supper, Rosa put Emma to bed and told stories about the Christmas star, her mother, brave girls, and magical things. Daniel often stood in the doorway listening, and sometimes Rosa caught him watching her with an expression that made her heart stumble. Something slow and quiet grew between them. He'd bring her firewood without being asked. She'd mend his shirts, fingers lingering. Their hands brushed as they passed dishes. The air changed. One night, after Emma was asleep, they sat by the fire making dolls together. Daniel was clumsy with the needle, but he tried. Why did you never remarry? Rosa asked. He was silent a moment. Never found someone who fit. Who saw me, not just the ranch. And you, he asked softly. Why didn't you leave sooner? Because I thought being unwanted was better than being alone. Because I'm the fat widow nobody wants. Her voice cracked. I thought that was all I'd ever be. Daniel set down his sewing and looked at her with a steady intensity. Then they weren't looking, he said. The fire cracked. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, something fragile and precious hovered. Rosa looked away first, but she felt it. The shift. The change. The beginning of something that felt like home. They came on a gray Tuesday afternoon, 6 weeks after Christmas. Rosa was teaching Emma to stitch a doll's face when she heard horses in the yard. She looked up through the window and her stomach dropped. 3 riders. Margaret in her black traveling cloak, Thomas on his gray gelding, Peter slouched in his saddle. Her in-laws. Emma saw Rosa's face go white. "What's wrong?" "Stay inside," Rosa whispered. She met them at the door before they could knock. Daniel appeared behind her, hand on her shoulder. Thomas dismounted first, face hard as stone. "Rosalind, we thought you'd gone to your sister's house. Imagine our surprise when we heard you were living here. Unmarried. With a strange man." "He's not strange," Emma said loudly from behind Rosa. "He's my papa." Margaret ignored her, eyes fixed on Rosa with cold fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The scandal? The gossip? You've ruined whatever shred of reputation you had left." "She doesn't answer to you," Daniel said quietly. Peter laughed, still mounted. "Doesn't she? She lived under our roof for 3 years. Ate our food. We took care of her when no one else would." "You made me sleep in a closet and serve guests from the kitchen," Rosa said, voice shaking. "That's not taking care of someone." Thomas's face reddened. "Ungrateful girl." "She's not going anywhere," Daniel said. His voice was calm but absolute. "Rosa stays as long as she wants." Margaret's lip curled. "The town won't stand for this impropriety. A widow living alone with a widower? Unchaperoned? It's indecent." "Then let them talk," Daniel said. Peter finally dismounted, swaying slightly. "Already drinking, even this early. Come on, Rosa. Be reasonable. We'll overlook this lapse in judgment. Come back where you belong." "She doesn't belong with you." Emma pushed past Rosa and stood in front of her, small and fierce. "She belongs here. With us. This is her home." Margaret tried to push past, but Daniel stepped forward, blocking her path. "I think it's time you left." Thomas grabbed for Rosa's arm. "She's family." Daniel caught his wrist. "Touch her again and you'll regret it." The two men stared at each other. Thomas was older, used to being obeyed. But Daniel didn't move, didn't blink. Finally, Thomas backed down. "You'll regret this, Rosalind," Margaret spat. "Both of you will. The whole town will know what you are." They mounted and rode away, leaving a wake of frozen silence. Rosa waited until they were out of sight. Then she turned and walked directly to the guest room where she'd been sleeping. She pulled her carpet bag from under the bed and started packing. Her hands shook so badly she could barely fold her clothes. Everything Margaret had said was true. Rosa was ruining them. The gossip would destroy Daniel's reputation, would hurt Emma, would make their lives impossible. She had to leave. Had to go before she caused more damage. She was shoving her nightgown into the bag when Daniel appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing?" "I have to go." Her voice broke. "I can't let you and Emma suffer because of me." "Rosa." "No." She couldn't look at him. "They're right. The town will talk. They'll say terrible things about you. About Emma. I won't do that to you. I won't. Don't go." The words were so soft she almost didn't hear them. She stopped packing and finally looked up. Daniel stood in the doorway, and the expression on his face made her chest ache. "You're not a burden," he said. "You're the reason this house feels like a home again. You're the reason Emma laughs. You're the reason I—" He stopped. Swallowed. Behind him, Emma appeared, eyes red from crying. "Are you leaving?" Her voice was tiny, devastated. Rosa looked at this child who'd become hers. This man who'd seen her worth. This home that had wrapped around her like a quilt. She couldn't finish. Emma ran to her and wrapped her arms around Rosa's waist, sobbing. "Please don't go. Please. I love you. Papa loves you. We need you." Rosa sank to her knees and gathered Emma close. Over the child's head, she met Daniel's eyes. "I'm a burden," she whispered. "I've always been a burden." Daniel crossed the room and knelt beside them. "You're not. You're family. And family doesn't leave." Emma pulled back just enough to look at Rosa's face. "You promised you'd teach me to make 20 more dolls. You promised we'd find the Christmas star again next year. You can't leave. You can't. Rosa looked at her half-packed bag. At this child in her arms. At this man looking at her like she was precious. She thought of Margaret's house. The locked room. The voices through the floor. Then she thought of this, morning coffee with Daniel, stories at Emma's bedside, hands touching in the firelight. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. Emma's sob turned into a laugh. You promise? I promise. Daniel's hand covered hers. Thank you. Together, they unpacked her bag and put her things back where they belonged. Sunday service was usually quiet in the small church on the hill. Not today. Rosa felt every eye on her as she walked down the aisle with Daniel and Emma. Whispers followed them like smoke. Margaret sat in the third pew, face carved from ice. Thomas beside her, Peter slouched and smirking. The whispering campaign had been building for weeks. Rosa knew what they said, living in sin. Shameless. That poor man, trapped by a desperate widow. Emma held Rosa's hand tight. Don't listen to them, she whispered. They took their seats near the front. Reverend Miller began his sermon, but Rosa barely heard the words. She could feel Margaret's eyes boring into the back of her head, could hear the whispers that never quite stopped. Then, halfway through the sermon, Daniel stood. Rosa's stomach dropped. What are you? He didn't answer. He walked to the front of the church and turned to face the congregation. Reverend Miller stopped mid-sentence, surprised. Mr. Garrett? Forgive me, Reverend. But I have something to say. The church went absolutely silent. Daniel's eyes found Rosa. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a doll, the one with orange yarn hair that Rosa had given Emma on Christmas morning. Most of you know my daughter lost her mother when she was 4, Daniel began. His voice was steady, carrying to every corner of the room. Some of you know I've struggled to raise her alone. That I've failed more times than I've succeeded. Emma squeezed Rosa's hand tighter. On Christmas Eve, my daughter and I met someone at the market. A woman sitting alone with dolls nobody wanted. A woman who'd been told her whole life that she wasn't good enough, wasn't worthy, wasn't worth seeing. Margaret's face went purple. Emma asked if we could bring her home for Christmas. And I said yes. Daniel held up the doll. This woman, Rosa, made this. She made 24 of them. Each one stitched with skill that would shame any seamstress here. Each one carrying a piece of her heart. He walked down the aisle toward Rosa. The entire congregation watched. For 6 weeks, Rosa has lived in my home. She's cooked our meals, mended our clothes, taught my daughter to sew and to dream. She's told stories that make Emma believe in magic again. She's made a house into a home. He stopped in front of Rosa's pew. His eyes locked on hers. And yes, people have talked. They've said it's improper. Scandalous. That I'm taking advantage, or she's scheming, or we're both fools. Margaret started to rise. This is completely... They're right that it's improper, Daniel continued, louder now. Which is why I'm fixing it. He held out his hand to Rosa. She took it, trembling, and let him pull her to her feet. In front of everyone, in front of Margaret and Thomas and Peter, in front of the entire town, Daniel dropped to one knee. Rosalind Whitmore, he said, voice cracking with emotion. You've given me more than you know. You've given my daughter a mother. You've given our house laughter. You've given me... He stopped, swallowed. You've given me hope that I could love again. Rosa couldn't breathe. You are not a burden. You are not too much. You are exactly enough. He held up the doll. These dolls? They're beautiful. You're beautiful. And I'm asking you now, in front of God and everyone, will you marry me? Will you stay forever? The church was so quiet Rosa could hear her own heartbeat. She looked at Daniel, at this man who'd seen her worth when no one else would. At Emma, bouncing in the pew with desperate hope. At the doll with its orange yarn hair and button eyes, carrying her mother's memory and her own heart. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, yes. Emma shrieked and launched herself at them both. Daniel stood and pulled Rosa into his arms, and the church erupted. Some people applauded. Some sat in shocked silence. Mrs. Patterson dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Young mothers smiled and whispered approvingly. Margaret stormed out, Thomas and Peter following. But Rosa didn't care. She was laughing and crying and holding on to Daniel and Emma like they were the only solid things in the world. Reverend Miller cleared his throat, smiling. I suppose we'll be planning a wedding. 1 year later. The church hall smelled of pine and gingerbread and fresh possibilities. Rosa stood at a long table surrounded by 12 little girls, all bent over dolls in progress. Emma, now 8, moved between them like a tiny teacher, adjusting stitches and praising efforts. Remember, Emma said seriously, the belly should be round. That's how you know it's made with love. Rosa smiled and touched her own very round belly, 7 months along with the baby that had been a surprise and a blessing. Across the room, Daniel leaned against the doorframe watching her. Their eyes met and he smiled, that private smile that still made her heart skip. She'd taught 6 classes now. Every Sunday after service, she gathered the girls and passed on her mother's techniques. Button by button, stitch by stitch, memory by memory. Some of their mothers had been in the church the day Daniel proposed. Some had whispered cruel things about Rosa. But they brought their daughters anyway, because Rosa's dolls had become famous in the county. Because she'd become someone worth knowing. A little girl held up her finished doll, lopsided, imperfect, beautiful. Is it good enough, Mrs. Garrett? Mrs. Garrett. Even after a year, the name still made her want to cry. It's perfect, Rosa said. Absolutely perfect. After class, Daniel helped her pack up while Emma raced ahead to ready the wagon. His hand lingered on the small of her back. Protective, possessive, loving. Happy? He asked. Rosa looked at the girls chattering with their mothers, at Emma waiting by the door, at this man who'd claimed her in front of everyone when she'd thought she was unclaimable. More than I ever thought possible. He kissed her temple. Good. Because you're stuck with us now. Promise. Promise. They walked out into the December sunlight together, Emma running ahead, and Rosa felt it with absolute certainty. She was home. She was loved. She was enough. And tonight, when they looked up at the winter sky, the Christmas star would be there, burning bright over their house, reminding them that no matter how dark things had been, light always found a way back.